Hey class, aloha from my house in Arlington Heights. So today we are going to start in our first series of lectures. Remember, like I said all along, I want to take the lectures out of the classroom and put them to you guys here at home. So again, these are always going to be on Schoology, so make sure you have that access code. Okay, always very important to have that code. So without further ado, I don't want to bore you too much. We're going to start today. We're going to start talking about Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, our three and most important presidents of our long storied history of a nation. And one more thing before we get started with George Washington, we are going to start treating these like readings, whereas there may or may not be homework quizzes for these. So it's in your best interest to take notes, okay? Follow along as best you can. Pause if you need to take a break, go get a glass of water, fast forward if I'm boring you too much and it's something that we've already talked about in class, or rewind if you need to catch something else, okay? But I'm going to go at my pace of lecture, which allows you guys to kind of pause me, fast forward me, rewind me if you need to. Watch as many times as you need to. So without further ado, we're going to start off with George Washington, and we're going to talk about why he was number one, okay? So, first off, Washington, he's elected. Now, we've talked about this already. 1789 to 1797, okay? Served 2 terms, right? He was a Federalist, and I hope you know what Federalist means. Again, they believed in a strong central government, right? We set up this democracy in order to kind of preserve the independence of the people, okay? Now, the only problem with George Washington is, just like every leader, he was a bit paranoid, right? He was really fearful of letting the American people down, okay? But, again, did a fantastic job. My favorite president. Okay, so what Washington did is he expands the executive branch of the government. Now remember, the executive branch is it's basically the president, right? It's the face of the nation, okay, commander in chief. Remember all those things that we've talked about. So what he does is he adds 3 different positions to the executive branch. He adds the Department of State, which handles foreign affairs. He handles the Department of War, which handles all of military matters, and he administers the Department of Treasury, which handles the country's finances. Remember, taxing, making sure that the country is fiscally sound. Okay, so he adds 3, and you can see them right there in the picture. Now, we've come a long way. Here we are with, this is actually last year's cabinet. If you guys are staying up with current events, you may not see John Kerry. He was our current, he's our current executive, I'm sorry, not executive, he is our current Secretary of State, but you can see right next to Joe Biden, not Barack Obama, but the woman on his, if you're facing right, that's Hillary Clinton. She was the former Secretary of State. But anyways, so let's get into it. A couple things happened during Washington's presidency involving this man right here, Alexander Hamilton. Some might say the brightest man that ever comes into existence for America, okay? Now, he is a big supporter of the Federalists and believes that there should be a couple things. Strong central government. Government should be educated, upper class, and ruled by mostly the elites of society, okay? Now, again, we know that not everyone agrees with that, and we're going to get to that in just a little bit, okay? He also supported a very loose interpretation of the Constitution, okay? He believes in this idea that the federal government has a wide range of powers, right? We're not just constrained to this document that comes into existence, right? It's meant to be kind of mixed and molded, and it's a piece of clay, right? You can manipulate it to how you want it, right? He favored a big national bank. Okay, now what this national bank would do is it would handle all of the finances for the nation, okay? Just like you maybe have an ATM card or your parents have the credit card, okay, this would be the Chase Bank of the nation. Whatever the nation spends comes out of this bank. Whatever the nation borrows comes out of this bank, all right? Now we'll get to that in some opposition in just a moment. But he also, because he wanted the national bank, he stressed the big importance of commerce and industry, right? Washington said in his farewell address that we looked at that we should only be dealing with other nations in terms of their economic aspect, right? No politics. Hamilton was no different, okay? So he comes up with his financial plan, and he writes the Report on Public Credit, and you can see the picture right there, right? Now he proposes federal government takes states' debts, right? Any debt that a state makes, and now this angers a lot of southern states who had very little debt, right? They're just like, well, we handle our finances well. It's probably because you have slaves, but that's another point, okay? Now he feels that this will bind the national government and the state governments together, right? We always want to increase unity. It's one of Washington's favorite things that he likes to talk about, right? Bringing the nation together, right? Some people still think of it's not really the United States yet. We're still just kind of this band of colonies. So what he creates is called the BUS, acronym for the Bank of the United States. Okay, now this would be funded by federal government and wealthy private investors. Okay, think about that. Wealthy private investors having a major stake in the federal government. Okay, goes to Hamilton's belief of him wanting to be ruled by the rich elite. And issues paper money and handles taxes and other government funds, any loans that the national government might need to lend out. Now, it's very controversial, okay? It questions the Constitution entirely, okay? The literal interpretation of the Constitution says that there really shouldn't be a national bank. It really shouldn't even handle the finances. But Hamilton goes in and finds some loopholes and say, well, we can take this clause, make it sound like this, put it in this branch, and then voila, we have a BUS, okay? So the BUS gets settled. People want it. Hamilton wants it. A lot of people don't want it. So the Republicans, they will only vote for the BUS only if the capital moves from the elitist Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. Now, at this point, Philadelphia is the home to the national government. Washington, D.C. is kind of just more or less a plantation at this point, not even a city. So they reach this compromise, and bada bing, bada boom, we move the capital to Washington, D.C. Okay, structured just like the way we see it. Take their architecture from ancient Greece, and they take it from elitist Philadelphia, right, those northern states, middle northern states, and moves it to kind of the southern agrarian in between Maryland and Virginia. So in comes Thomas Jefferson, right, the current Secretary of State. Completely different views. Okay, he's a Republican, right? Republicans of that time, right, not right now. Republicans of that time, they want a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and they favored strong state and local governments, right? Each state should rule by themselves. They shouldn't be bound by the national government. And they also believed, not they, but Thomas Jefferson also really believed in agrarian nation, and he really wanted to empower, not enfeeble, the yeoman farmers, okay? Those people that really produce the food for the nation, okay? He was supported by the South and West. I mean, go figure. Those are the two biggest agrarian farm state societies in the nation right now, right? The West, the Appalachian Mountains, the frontier, it's where everyone was farming. There was no city then. And the South, of course, were big plantations. So a couple of events lead up to all this and Washington's current removal from office. He signs Pinckney's Treaty, which many of you did for the fake book. So we'll just go through this really quick. Signed in 1795. Now, Thomas Pinckney was this man who pretty much built this treaty from the ground up, okay? Now, we wanted land, right? We wanted to move west. We wanted to move south. We wanted the continent to ourselves. So Pinckney's treaty was with Spain, and it obtained virtually all of the American concessions. Everything west of the Appalachians, Mississippi onward, okay? As you can see, Spain gave up all the lands east of the Mississippi, except for Florida. They kept Florida, always Spain with Florida, and opened up the Mississippi to American traders. Now, that's huge, because the Mississippi goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. No longer do South American goods have to go around Florida, around the Bahamas, and up the Cape, right? They can go straight to the Mississippi, straight to those western outposts. And it's important because it helped open up the Appalachian for further American expansion westward, right? Always wanting to move west. Secondly, Washington, just, being a boss right there, has a little sniff in the Battle of Fallen Timbers, okay? Washington was called Federal troops against Native Americans. Okay, now this battle ended Native American resistance in Ohio. Okay, again, Ohio is very west of the Appalachian Mountains. We get the land from Spain, but still, who are we fighting for? Who owns the land? It's Native Americans at this point. Okay, so the Treaty of Greenville, Thomas Greenville signs this, and the U.S. government takes over the native land in Ohio for $10,000 a year. Okay, we pay the Native Americans $10,000 a year. It's like we're paying rent. right? Now, this also helps the government's plans for westward expansion. And $10,000 a year for that western land, that's insane, right? Some mortgages for houses are like $10,000. I digress. So let's continue. Washington, one more thing, Jay's Treaty. So, Battle of Fallen Timbers happens, and Britain fears that they would have to fight both France and US to obtain control of the west of the Appalachian Mountains, basically the Midwest. Britain's still in the fight, guys. We haven't left Britain yet. So Jay negotiates a treaty in London for the British to evacuate their posts in the Northwest Territory. Northwest Territory being somewhat north and west of the Appalachians, okay? Think like, Upper Pennsylvania, Great Lake area, right? That's where we're at. And it angers a lot of Americans because it allowed the British to continue their fur trade. A lot of French up in that region trading furs with the Native Americans, okay? Now, Washington sees all this, and he's tired. He doesn't think he's doing a good job. In his presidency, all these major things are happening. The guy's finding a country. It's okay, Wash. Now, he doesn't accept a third term against the wishes of many. Washington advises against permanent alliances, and he warns against the dividing of political parties. Read a newspaper nowadays. It's kind of the norm, right? We have permanent alliances with almost everyone in the EU. We have the UN, right? We have this thing going on in Syria. And Washington leaves the country with a strong central government, right? The strong central government kind of ruling everything. And it's expanding empire. It's relatively neutral. Remember, Washington says, let's not keep alliances. We need to be neutral. And we need to only do economic business, not political business with other nations. So it's fiscally stable. It's one of the only times in American history where we don't have a national debt. That's awesome. So now that'll take us to John Adams, and that'll be the next video. So thanks for listening, and so long.